The San Francisco 49ers are heading back to the Super Bowl. We have a rematch of the Super Bowl that was 2020, a year that we all remember fondly.
Yes, very, very, very fondly.
God, save us all.
I will just say between 2018 and probably like 2 months ago, it's all the same.
Yeah, one big year.
Yeah, it's
when I heard that, I was like, "Oh boy, that sucked." That was the
beginning of the end.
Dumper of a year. Yeah,
it was literally the beginning of the end.
Yeah, it really was. But they're heading to Vegas, and the 49ers erased I mean, look, this is.
It looked like an
incredible.
Unconquerable deficit the way that game was going.
Down 24-7 at halftime.
And it felt might as well have been 40-7.
Oh, absolutely.
San Francisco could do nothing right.
Yet they were this little engine that could. Mm-hmm. And when they were down 14-0, they stuck to who they are and what they are, which is they ran the ball with Christian McCaffrey. I loved when Detroit came out early, they just pounded the rock. It is exactly what I thought Baltimore was going to do. What the Detroit Lions came out doing early, getting to the edges, setting the edges and saying, we know where your weakness is and we were going to bludgeon you over the head with it. And they did it.
They got to the edge over and over and over. And they get the big break from Jameson. But other than that, it was just 8 yards, 9 yards, 8 yards, 9 yards.
Penei Sewell, a man possessed. Ben Johnson was in his bag getting creative with motioning your right tackle across the formation and having him lead block. Like he was knocking dudes over, pointing at them in the middle of a play and laughing and then going find somebody else to
kill somebody else.
In the National Football League, that is unheard of.
It's him and Trent Williams.
Penei Sewell
that's the list.
Yet through all of this, San Francisco just said, we know who we are and we're not going to change who we are. And what I see is like lessons learned along the way. And this is why I'm not going to criticize or crush Dan Campbell, just like I didn't Dan Lanning on going forward on fourth down in those situations.
No, they are who they are. And I tweeted out a graphic after the game yesterday that coming into the playoffs where it's the CPOE, the expected average gained by decisions during the regular season. And it had the 4 coaches in the championship game. Coming into the playoffs, Dan Campbell was so far above every other coach in expected win percentage added based on his decision-making. He was at 93% win percentage added over the season. The next closest coach in that group was Andy Reid at 33%.
Yeah. Dan Campbell's done an incredible job.
They are who they are based on his decisions and their processes for going for what they did all year long.
And I think that lessons along the way are what get you to that point to make those decisions, right? And if you don't learn from them, that is when you start getting the criticisms. And I think that Dan Campbell has learned a very costly and valuable lesson on some of those decision makings. But I also think that we've seen Kyle Shanahan, who's been criticized for his play calling in big games and late in games, see the 28-3 meltdown against the Patriots in the Super Bowl, where he went away from what they were, right? And it was like, just do what it takes to win the game. Well, San Francisco held their identity down 14-0 and said, we're just going to keep chopping away at this thing. It doesn't matter that we gave up the most points for a visiting team in the first half in conference championship game history. 24 points, by the way. That's a record. No visiting team has ever scored 24 and a half.
And they did it in a manner that was dominant, the Lions.
Wasn't it weird, though, to see that field goal at the end of the half, that 21-yarder? That's what an extra point used to be. And I just remember going, this is so close. When I was watching, I was like, Matt is so close.
Now that it's been backed up.
And now we back it way up. It's like, that little chip shot was
good rule change.
We used to have. That's a great rule change.
There's a little bit of spiciness to it now.
Yeah, it's a little bit more difficult.
Just a little Emeril Lagasse bam.
Yeah. Kick it up a notch a little bit. But it was... They stuck with what they knew, and then what did San Francisco do coming out in the second half? They came out firing. They went deep. They went to Brandon Ayuk. They were like, all right, we are going to gash you on the edges,
to Brandon Ayuk.
Edges of your secondary deep, and we are going to try to crush your soul that way. And Brock Purdy played an exquisite second half. And look,
he played as good a second half as he played a bad first half.
We call it turnover luck, right?
Mm-hmm.
Turnover luck.
Boy, did he have just a horseshoe shoved up his rear end on that throw.
2 weeks in a row, Darnell Savage had a walk-in pick six.
I mean,
and then this one, it bounces off the face mask of a defender because Detroit secondaries suck.
But also, he's a DB.
And Brandon Ayuk's like, whoop. Like, he was so far away from that ball.
It bounced 4 yards.
And he's like, oh, look what I found. And there is a luck involved. There's luck with any team getting, and you could say the same thing for like as skilled as Patrick Mahomes is running around for 7 seconds. And
that throw 9 times out of 10 to Travis Kelce is not only not complete to Travis Kelce, it's intercepted.
Yeah, well, it's 7 out of 10. It's complete to Travis Kelce, but for everybody else, it's not. Yeah. You know, like, but
a ball that just fluttered through the middle of the field, that's getting intercepted.
And so San Francisco said, no, the way that we're going to apply pressure is just by staying slow and steady, right? And that's what the great teams do. And San Francisco,
get away from who you are, who your identity is, what you're built on. And if you were going to ask me coming into this game who was going to be more of that, I would have said the guys in blue. Not getting away because of Dan Campbell, because what has been the knock on Kyle Shanahan?
He gets away from it.
When he gets away from it, particularly when what? They get behind. He does not come from behind.
I thought we saw 2 games in a row. Kyle Shanahan has had a steady hand.
Which in the past has been if you're going to put a red mark on his name, that was it.
It absolutely is. And I think that should give 49er fans a little bit of that confidence heading into the Super Bowl, where they are favored. Like,
it was at one point when I checked last.
Yeah, it opened at 3.5.
It got bet down to 1 immediately.
Well, Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
But there is you can take that solace in the fact that Shanahan 2 weeks in a row has just said, no. We're going to do what we do. And they trusted Brock Purdy. Purdy was awesome, keeping plays alive, running for first downs, creating extra time, and keeping his eyes downfield. I think that I've always been impressed with Brock Purdy. I thought that this was the game where he just said, all right, everybody shut up.
I let it all hang out, particularly in the second half.
That was incredible, but then we saw the power of momentum in football. And the power of momentum in football.
Mo's real. There's no more Mo being real than in football.
Because you get physically dominated in it. And that's what San Francisco
you get to put hands on people. That's the difference.
You saw pressure applied by Kansas City, kind of just squeezed Baltimore. You saw the same thing in a completely different way with San Francisco because they were playing from behind. They used momentum and they said, now it's on you to make the plays. And Josh Reynolds had 2 big drops. You had, I mean, those drops are brutal. The 4th down one, that's a tough catch, right? That's a tough catch. But at the same time, those are championship plays.
But the Lions in general treated that ball like a grease pig in the second half.
And there's also what both of the teams did that ended up winning, created turnovers. They weren't gifted turnovers. No. They created
the Zay Flowers fumble, as much as we kind of, protect the ball, all those kind of things, that's jumping over the top and punching the ball out. Yep. That's a football play. That's not luck. That's technique. That's execution. That's making a play in real time.
Same thing on a rookie running back in the biggest momentum swing of that game. Like, we can talk about going for it on 4th downs all we want when you're in field goal range.
To Gibbs earlier.
But when you think about what they did, they created the turnover. They forced the turnover, and they were unable to seal that ball bouncing off the helmet. And where you're sitting there like, dude, that's an interception. How does the game change?
And unable to get Debo down. Like, there's so many times in that second half where you had opportunities and the football gods flipped the coin and said no.
And San Francisco made the plays, man. They made the plays.
You're getting the opportunities, and in those opportunities, you came up wanting.
Momentum is as real as it gets because if you have a team on the opposite side that reacts to it, that's where it becomes that much more real. In Detroit, as brutal as that meltdown was, and that was tough to watch, man. That was tough to watch because it was just like gacking it away. plays were there to be made, and they just didn't.
No, and that's the thing is, it wasn't because they didn't have the opportunity.
Golly.
That's what's so killer about that game, and why we'll talk about what Dan Campbell said, following that game, and the likelihood of them being back in that position again.